What's wrong, Harrison? The intercom buzzed, and I was surprised to see my grandson Harrison standing there. It looked like he was coming back from school, as he was wearing his middle school uniform. Harrison had visited our house many times before and rang the intercom, but each time he would run away without saying anything. But that day, for some reason, he stood there motionless. When I looked into his eyes, I was sure he wanted to talk about something. "Come here and help Grandma harvest some vegetables," I said, opening the gate. Harrison quietly nodded and slowly stepped inside. For a while, as he started helping me with the farm work, Harrison remained silent. I waited, hoping he would open up to me on his own. After about 10 minutes, Harrison's face crumpled, and he began to shed large tears. "Why are you crying? Does something hurt?" I started to worry that he might have hurt himself and checked his arms and legs for any injuries.
No, that's not it. I'm sorry. I couldn't tell the truth until now.
I waited for Harrison to calm down and then gently encouraged him. "You've been wanting to say something, haven't you? Go ahead and tell me." "My name is Nancy, and I'm 65 years old. I used to work as a teller at the local bank. My husband, Jason, is 2 years older than me, and he was also a banker like me. Jason once told me,
A bank is built on human connections. Your smile has a special way of putting people at ease, so this job suits you well."
When I was still clueless about the world, Jason guided me as both a banker and a person, sometimes strictly, sometimes kindly. I was drawn to his genuine kindness, the way he treated everyone with a warm smile, regardless of who they were. Jason was highly trusted at the bank, and eventually, he rose to the position of branch manager.
"Nancy, we've got some fine eggplants again this year."
Jason said. "And these tomatoes are still small, but they're growing shiny and cute," I replied. After we retired from the bank, we began living modestly, tending a small vegetable garden in our yard as a hobby. At the end of May, our only son, John, who had already moved out and started his own family, came to visit with his wife and our grandchild. After graduating from university, John joined a company in the city, and 5 years later, he brought his fiancée, Amy, to meet us. But after that, all we received was a postcard announcing the birth of our grandchild, and then nothing for 15 years.
"What have you been doing? Not even showing your face at New Year's or Christmas? You couldn't even pick up the phone once in a while?"
Jason's voice, strengthened by years of diaphragmatic breathing as a branch manager, echoed through the small entrance of our traditional Japanese house.
"I'm sorry, Dad. I was too busy with work to stay in touch."
John replied. "Jason, calm down. You're making Amy uncomfortable," I said with a wry smile, trying to soothe Jason, who was speaking excitedly. When Jason gets too happy, his words can become harsh, and people who don't know him might mistake it for anger. "It's been a long time, Amy. I'm glad to see you're doing well," I said.
It's been too long. I'm sorry we haven't been in touch.
Amy replied. She was a bit thinner than when we last saw her 15 years ago, but her bright smile was still the same. Standing beside her, carrying her bags, was a boy who looked to be about middle school age. I smiled at him. "You must be Harrison. It's nice to meet you." "I'm your grandmother," I said. Harrison, looking a little shy, simply bowed his head and said nothing. Even so, I couldn't contain my joy at meeting my grandson, so I kept talking. I've only seen pictures of you as a baby, but now that I see you in person, you look just like John did when he was young. How old are you?
Harrison is 14 now. He'll be taller than me soon.
John said, standing next to Harrison. That night, we gathered around the dinner table with our son and his family for the first time in 15 years. Back then, Harrison was still in Amy's belly. I made too many side dishes for Harrison, so feel free to have seconds of rice too, I said, but Harrison only gave a faint smile and didn't say anything in response. Come to think of it, neither John nor Amy had said much since they arrived. They exchanged only a few polite greetings but didn't share anything about what had been going on in their lives. Hey, John. Now that you're back home, why not relax a bit like you did when you were a kid? Harrison won't be able to unwind if you're all tense like this, I joked, trying to lighten the mood. John and Amy exchanged glances and then nodded at each other.
Mom, we weren't sure if we should ask, but the truth is, both Amy and I are currently out of work.
John said. What? No work at all? Why? I was stunned by the sudden confession and exchanged a worried look with Jason.
We both worked at the same company, but things got complicated, and we got tired of the office politics. So, we decided to quit and look for new jobs, but we haven't found anything yet. I hate to ask, but could we come here for dinner a few times a week? Amy's a great cook, and I can help out with cleaning or anything else.
John said, bowing deeply with Amy, both pressing their foreheads to the tatami floor in a plea. Of course, I should have been happy to see my son's family and my grandson every day, but... Lift your heads. But more importantly, do you have any job prospects? Harrison's in middle school now, right? You'll need money for his school fees and exams and everything else.
Isn't that enough?
Jason interrupted me, gently smiling as he tried to stop my anxious outburst.
They must have their reasons,
He said, turning his gaze toward our son and his wife.
Like Nancy, I can't say I'm entirely optimistic about your situation. But when family is in need, it's our duty to help. You're welcome to come for meals whenever you need.
Jason said kindly, then turned to me.
Isn't that right, Nancy?
If you say so, I replied. It would be a lie to say all my worries vanished, but I decided to follow Jason's judgment. With Jason's approval, our son's family started visiting us 2 or 3 times a week from that day on. During the day, John and Amy seemed to be juggling part-time jobs while searching for something more permanent. Seeing John sighing as he looked at his bills from a bank made me want to reach out and help in any way I could. Are you managing okay? If it's too hard, don't hesitate to move in with us, I offered.
There's no need to worry, Mom. We'll keep trying a little longer.
John replied with a smile. I decided to trust his words. By mid-June, the rainy season was in full swing, with heavy rain falling day after day.
Are you leaving early tomorrow? The rain seems to be getting stronger. If you have time, why don't you stay over?
Jason suggested. John hesitated, saying,
We wouldn't want to impose.
but exchanged a glance with Amy and then replied more modestly.
If it's no trouble for you, we would appreciate it.
And so, John's family started staying overnight at our house. Whenever Harrison visited, he always kept his head down and didn't say a word. Harrison, is something bothering you? I asked him one day, but before he could respond, John jumped in.
Yeah, Harrison had a bad test recently and got scolded by his teacher. It really brought him down.
John said.
I see. So you must have inherited that struggle with studying from John. Sorry, Harrison. It's all your dad's fault that your grades aren't great. Which means it's my fault.
Jason joked. Harrison nodded slightly, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was just trying to be polite for John's sake. Around this time, Harrison began visiting our house almost daily, even on days when he wasn't staying over. He would ring the intercom and then stand there for a while, silently watching us through the window. But when I'd call out, "Come in," he would look startled and dash off to the bus stop as if he were fleeing. Since he was always in his school uniform, it must have been on his way home from school. "What's going on with Harrison?" I asked Jason, concerned about his odd behavior.
I don't think you need to worry too much. He's 14. It's not unusual for a kid that age to have a problem or two that they don't want to share with adults.
Jason replied. That may be true, but even though I knew that was possible, I couldn't help but feel that Harrison's daily visits, even in the pouring rain, had some deeper significance. In early July, the rainy season took a brief break, leaving us with damp and muggy days. It was just past midnight when I suddenly woke up, alerted by a faint sound. It seemed like the sound of footsteps on the carpet coming from the living room, and I held my breath. Did I lock up properly? I kept replaying the memory in my mind. Every night before bed, I would check the locks first, and then Jason would double-check the same spots as a precaution. Even if I had missed something, meticulous Jason would never overlook it. I reached for my smartphone by my bedside and, clutching it tightly, cautiously opened the door to the living room. Using the faint light from my phone, I scanned every corner of the room, but nothing seemed out of place. Maybe it was just my imagination, I thought. Jason, who had been sleeping beside me, woke up too and asked,
What's wrong?
I thought I heard something, but it seems like it was nothing, I replied.
I definitely locked up. But if you want, we can check again.
Jason offered. We wouldn't want to wake John and the others with all this noise. Let's just go back to bed, I suggested. Neither of us thought much of it, so we returned to the bedroom and went back to sleep. I don't know how much time had passed when I was awakened again, this time by hurried footsteps and voices from John and his wife.
Hey! Hurry up!
John shouted.
Harrison, forget about washing your face. Just grab your things and put on your shoes.
Amy urged. The sudden commotion jolted me fully awake. The sky outside was pitch dark, with not even a hint of moonlight seeping through the curtains. I slipped out of bed and made my way to the living room, where John and Amy were rushing around. It was just after 4 a.m. You're up early. What's the rush at this hour? I asked. John jumped, startled, and dropped the Boston bag he was holding. The bag landed with a heavy thud, its contents clearly weighing it down.
Mom, why are you up so early?
John asked, trying to sound casual. I could ask you the same thing. And what's in that bag? I replied. John quickly picked up the bag and hid it behind his back.
It's nothing. Just some important work stuff.
He said hastily.
That's right.
Nothing for you to worry about, Nancy.
Amy added, laughing a bit too loudly. Work. What? Did you find a new job? I asked, confused.
Yes, that's right. I just got a call from, a college friend. I need to head to the company right now.
John stammered, with Amy nodding vigorously beside him. Well, congratulations. But isn't this a bit sudden? Won't you have breakfast first? I asked.
There's a meeting first thing in the morning. It's a long drive, so we'll have to skip breakfast.
John replied quickly. At that moment, Jason came into the room.
This is all happening fast. Are you sure this company is trustworthy?
Jason asked, reverting to his old branch manager's concerned tone.
Dad, you've always been such a worrywart. It's fine, really. The company is run by a college friend, and everyone there is kind and trustworthy. There's nothing to worry about.
John said.
Well then, I suppose it's not my place to interfere.
Jason said, nodding in agreement. John also nodded, visibly relieved.
Anyway, we should get going.
John said, as he and Amy made a move toward the front door. But for some reason, Harrison seemed glued to the spot, refusing to move from the entrance.
What are you doing? Let's go!
John grabbed Harrison's arm and forcibly dragged him outside. Does Harrison really need to go? With summer vacation coming up, he could stay with us. I offered. Amy replied,
We appreciate your kindness, Nancy, but we really can't impose on you any further. Thank you, though.
Ignoring my attempt to stop her, Amy took the bag from John and headed to the car. John, meanwhile, pulled Harrison's arm firmly and scolded him.
Enough of this nonsense.
All we could do was watch helplessly as they drove away. Jason said,
Well, at least John's got a job now. All we can do is support them.
That's true, but... Unlike Jason, who was genuinely supportive, I couldn't help but worry about Harrison. His behavior just didn't sit right with me. 3 days later, in the afternoon, I was sweating as I harvested summer vegetables from the garden, as I usually did. After about an hour of work, I took a break in the living room, sipping some juice when the doorbell rang. I thought it might be a delivery, so I opened the door, and there stood Harrison, who was supposed to have left with his parents. Harrison, what's going on? I asked, trying to contain my surprise and happiness. Normally, Harrison would run off to the bus stop the moment I spoke to him, but today, he just stood there, not moving an inch. What's wrong? Why don't you come inside? I asked, noticing that he seemed to want to say something. Would you like to come and help Grandma with the vegetable harvest? Is that okay? I suggested, trying to coax him in. Harrison seemed to hesitate, looking back at me silently, unsure whether to enter. Your grandpa's out at a neighborhood meeting, so if you could help me instead, I'd really appreciate it. I added, opening the gate and beckoning him in. Finally, Harrison nodded quietly and walked inside. For a while, as he helped me in the garden, Harrison remained silent, and I patiently waited for him to open up on his own. About 10 minutes later, I noticed a black snake slithering near Harrison's feet. The snake had already coiled, ready to strike, but Harrison hadn't noticed it yet. Harrison! Watch out! I shouted instinctively, pushing him aside. The snake lunged and bit into my arm instead. Realizing what had happened, Harrison let out a small scream, but when he saw the snake biting me, he grabbed a nearby stick and chased the snake out of the yard, shouting,
Get away from my grandma!
Harrison was about to continue chasing the snake, but I stopped him, saying, Thank you, that's enough. That snake must have been startled, thinking it was about to be stepped on. I added, trying to ease Harrison's anxiety with a smile.
But Grandma, it bit you!
Harrison said, his voice filled with concern. Don't worry, that snake isn't venomous. I'm fine, I reassured him. Suddenly, all the strength seemed to drain out of Harrison, and he collapsed to the ground.
Why did you protect me?
He asked, looking up at me with a puzzled expression. Why would you even ask that? I replied, equally curious. You're my precious grandson, of course I'd protect you. At that moment, Harrison's face crumpled, and he began to cry, tears streaming down his cheeks. Why are you crying? Are you hurt somewhere? I asked, worried that he might have been injured, and I checked his arms and legs for any signs of harm.
No, that's not it. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for not telling you the truth sooner.
Harrison sobbed. I waited for him to calm down, then gently encouraged him. You've been wanting to say something, haven't you? Go ahead, tell me. Harrison took a deep breath and said,
Mom and Dad made me promise not to say anything.
Then, he slowly took off his shirt, revealing his back covered in bruises and scrapes. I was speechless, shocked by the sight before me. Did John do this to you? I asked softly. Harrison nodded and began to tell me everything. After losing their jobs, my son and his wife had fallen into gambling. On the days when things didn't go well, they would take their frustrations out on Harrison. Harrison also revealed that the reason they had returned home was to get their hands on the gold bars Jason kept in a safe in the living room, a part of his savings for retirement.
I overheard them talking about their plan.
Harrison confessed.
They threatened me, saying I'd regret it if I told you and Grandpa.
Terrified by his father's threats, Harrison had been unable to tell us the truth and had been suffering alone all this time. Once they discovered the safe's code, my son and his wife packed the gold bars into a bag, converted them to cash the same day, and left for a trip to Hawaii, abandoning Harrison. You were so brave to tell me all this, I said, pulling Harrison into a tight hug as he cried in frustration and sorrow. An hour later, I told Jason about everything when he returned from the neighborhood meeting.
I can't believe this.
He said. Though Jason seemed to understand what I was saying, his desire to believe in our son was stronger. It's the truth. The gold bars are gone, I insisted. Jason quickly went to the living room, opened the safe, and checked inside.
No! But that doesn't mean it was them. Maybe someone broke in from the outside. Yes! You mentioned something about hearing strange noises that night, didn't you?
Jason was still trying to convince himself of John's innocence. But you made sure all the doors were locked that night, didn't you? And besides...
What is it? Is there something else?
Jason asked, noticing my hesitation. I debated whether to show him, but then I made up my mind and showed Jason the video saved on Harrison's phone. His face contorted with a mix of sadness and anger as he watched the video. It clearly showed John and Amy sneaking into the living room at night, taking the gold bars out of the safe, and stuffing them into a Boston bag. I didn't want you to see this, but this is the reality, I said, holding Harrison close and appealing to Jason's heart. Harrison's back is covered with scars. He says John did this to him. Harrison knew about his parents' plan, but he was too terrified to speak up. Even today, he must have been scared. Yet, he found the courage to tell us the truth. We can't turn a blind eye to his bravery. The one who's suffering the most isn't me or you, it's Harrison. Jason quietly looked down at Harrison's face, then gently patted his head.
It must have been so hard for you. So painful. I see now. Grandpa was wrong. I was wrong. Harrison, please forgive me.
Jason said, shaking his head vigorously to dispel his sadness, which quickly turned into an expression of anger. A week later, Jason and I visited the apartment where our son's family was living, guided by Harrison. They're supposed to return today, right? I asked for confirmation, and Harrison answered clearly, yes.
There's nothing in the fridge. What kind of life were they living?
Jason said, checking the kitchen. According to Harrison, they left just enough money for 10 days of food before going on their trip. Soon, we heard a familiar car engine stop in the parking lot. The sound of footsteps echoed up the stairs, followed by the laughter of John and Amy, getting closer. The front door slowly opened, revealing John and Amy, their skin sun-kissed from the trip.
Did you enjoy the trip?
Jason asked. Their laughter vanished in an instant.
Dad! What are you doing here?
John exclaimed. They had never told us their current address. When John spotted Harrison hiding behind me, he glared at him.
Harrison! Did you tell them? You traitor!
He stormed in with his shoes on, aiming for Harrison. Just as John was about to grab Harrison, Jason stepped in, blocking his path, and twisted John's thin, frail arm.
Ow! 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 I wasn't gonna do anything! Let me go!
John whined.
Good thing I learned some self-defense back in my bank days.
Jason said, easing his grip. John, now weak and gaunt, collapsed onto the floor.
How does it feel to go on a trip with stolen money?
Jason asked.
Stolen? What are you talking about?
John tried to play dumb, but Jason cut him off, showing him the video Harrison had secretly recorded, capturing their crime.
Your goal from the start was those gold bars, wasn't it?
Jason said.
Damn you! Harrison! You know what's going to happen to you later, don't you?
Amy shouted, making Harrison flinch.
So that's how you've been hurting this boy all this time. But it ends today. You're going to tell us everything.
Jason demanded, his glare silencing John. Defeated, John began to confess. Both John and Amy had a love for gambling. At first, they claimed it was just a way to blow off some steam, spending within their allowances. But after one big win, they couldn't stop, and before they knew it, they were drowning in debt.
I started misusing my position in accounting and took money from the company. When they found out, I was fired. We had no choice.
John admitted.
No choice? The problem started when you got hooked on gambling in the first place. You should have been more responsible as a parent.
Jason scolded, leaving them with nothing to say.
Dad, please! We'll change. We'll work hard from now on. Just please don't report us to the police.
John begged, falling to his knees, with Amy quickly following suit. Jason looked at me, then at Harrison.
What do you want, Harrison?
Jason asked.
I don't want Mom and Dad to get arrested. I just want them to go back to being the kind parents they used to be.
Harrison said, revealing his true feelings. Jason nodded with a smile.
All right, but on one condition. You two will undergo treatment under the guidance of specialists to overcome your gambling addiction. Do you agree?
We will. We'll do it.
John replied, and Amy nodded in agreement, thanking Jason for his leniency. While our son and his wife were in a facility undergoing specialized treatment, Harrison stayed with us, and we took care of him. Although taking the bus to school took a bit longer, Harrison never complained.
There are so many different sights to see now. I actually enjoy it more.
He said. It seemed that the uneasy feelings he had towards his parents were gradually easing, and he was beginning to appreciate the small changes around him. Every day after school, Harrison would help out with the farm work. Isn't weeding boring? I asked him once. Harrison smiled and replied,
Not at all. But isn't it hard for you to stay bent over like that, Grandma?
He was always more concerned about me. During the summer break, Harrison visited a nearby scrapyard and collected some pieces of wood. Skillfully, he crafted a small stool for me to make my farm work a bit easier. Thank you, Harrison. This makes things so much easier for me.
I'm glad. I'll make something even better next time,
he said with enthusiasm. By the start of the new semester, Harrison was more energetic than ever. At dinner, he would eagerly share stories about his day at school.
Can you believe people pay to experience farming now? When I told my friends that I help out on Grandma's farm, they were so jealous,
he said with a smile. That's wonderful. You should bring your friends over sometime. I'll make my special summer vegetable curry for them, I offered.
Awesome! But maybe we could skip the bitter melon?
Harrison suggested, causing Jason to burst into laughter.
What's this? Harrison's taste buds are still a bit childish, huh?
Jason teased.
I didn't say I hate it. I'll eat it, okay?
Harrison retorted, pouting. They looked more like best friends than grandfather and grandson. Harrison, who used to rarely speak, was now openly expressing his thoughts with us, filling our home with laughter.
Grandpa, thank you for always thinking of me.
Harrison said seriously, which made Jason look away, a bit embarrassed.
It was Nancy who saved you, not me. I'm just an old man who didn't notice anything.
Jason replied. Harrison shook his head firmly.
That's not true. You set the safes combination to my birthday, didn't you? I overheard Mom and Dad talking about it.
Jason smiled softly.
That's hardly something to be thanked for. You're our precious grandson. We couldn't see you for so long, but I never wanted to forget your birthday.
Thank you, Grandpa.
Harrison said again, his gratitude clear. We continued to receive daily letters of remorse and apology from our son and his wife at the facility. I found such comfort in the time I spent with Harrison that I sometimes wished it could last forever. But I knew that, in the end, he needed his parents, and one day he would return to them. Perhaps, once John and Amy completed their treatment and overcame their addictions, we could all go on a family trip together. As I savored these irreplaceable moments of happiness, I held on to the hope that they would one day truly repent. How did you like today's story? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.